Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. So, happy Shark Week everybody. Yes, it is that time of year again, and I have definitely been just as absorbed in Discovery Week's new programming with loads and loads of really interesting new documentaries about sharks. I don't know what it is about sharks specifically that catches the attention of so many people across the globe, but clearly there is something that appeals to a whole massive swath of humans because this is one of those big, massively watched television things that happens every single year, and it does seem to grow bigger and bigger every time we do this. Anyway, because it is Shark Week, this week I wanted to definitely throw my hat in the ring and talk a little bit about some favorite shark-centric films. In the past, I usually focus on documentaries, much like Shark Week tends to do as well. But this week, I have three traditional shark-centric movies that I wanted to talk about that all kind of have very different vibes. So hopefully one of these movies will appeal to you. If you are not a Shark Week person, definitely still check out our streaming services. There are thousands upon thousands of options out there via either our CleaveNet physical media service or our streaming services, Hoopla Digital and Canopy. You 100% will find something that you will love on there, I guarantee it. Or if you are a Shark Week person, there are tons and tons of other movies, whether you like classics or if you are more of a campy horror comedy person. There's so much available that you will absolutely love. So whether you are a Shark Week person or not, you will find something to enjoy. So anyway, as always, these three recommendations are all available entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. And without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, so my first recommendation for this week is a doozy. It is one that I have mentioned in the past, usually during my annual rundown of favorite horror films. But this week, since I am doing a scripted movie rundown for Shark Week, I could not include this one. And this one is, of course, 1975's Jaws. It is available on both DVD and Blu-ray via our CleaveNet service. And it is one of those films that I think anyone who enjoys films in general should see. Whether you are a Shark Week person or not, this is an American classic at this point. I really, truly believe that. If you have not seen Jaws, one, why not? But basic rundown, Jaws is an American natural horror film, meaning there's no fantasy whatsoever in this. It is based in real world setting, and it is based on Peter Benchley's novel. And this is one of those Steven Spielberg films where you can see the cogs turning in how he develops both pacing, because man, this is one of those movies where every bit of tension continues to build so perfectly. It is so well paced and timed as far as the suspense goes. You're always sort of looking for the next bit. But anyway, this natural horror film follows this sort of sleepy resort town when it's all of a sudden struck by a number of fatal shark attacks. And we, throughout the entire run of the movie, are continually waiting to really see the shark. And the music, the score by John Williams, it's just classic. How you can create a massive monster with like two notes is beyond my ability to fathom, but he does. No one really today doesn't know that that little interval. That tiny interval is so crammed with dread, and it works so perfectly with the movie. I will say the sequels are pretty terrible. Don't watch them. I mean, you can. They're just not. It's not just that the first film is so good that nothing could live up to it. It's that they are markedly bad movies. But it's amazing to me how good this particular film is. I already talked a little bit about Steven Spielberg and how he manages to craft this. And if you look at the history, there's so much interesting information about how the technology at the time was really kind of causing him a ludicrous amount of headache. But you know, there's this really interesting technological side to it with the animatronics of the shark Jaws, and how, you know, they had a lot of trouble with it. So this was the era of practical effects, and you didn't have like the computer to rely on to create that monster. You had to figure something out, and it was this animatronic thing that gave him severe headaches and nightmares for ages because of all the issues they were having with it. And it's really interesting when you do find out some of the backstory. So I strongly recommend you do that after you watch the movie. But besides that sort of technical aspect of it that works just really well, I mean, it looks so good on screen. There's the acting, like the leads are all really phenomenal. You have Roy Scheider, you have Richard Dreyfuss in here. You have different layers of relationships going on with different sort of levels of kinds of characters. Like you have the scientists, you have like your traditional archetype hero kind of characters. You have your villain is, of course, your shark, but you also have these problematic characters in this resort town that you're dealing with that you are 100% believe, sort of the bumbling bureaucrats who are trying to weigh the safety of human beings with the potential loss of economy. If you dare to say it's dangerous to get into the water, it is a resort town. What do you do? So there's a lot going on that is absolutely believable. And then you throw in a natural element that is the danger rather than a supernatural one. And I don't know, there's just something about films like this that I do think affect us differently than something that's based around something that we want to say is completely make-believe. Sharks exist. Man-eating sharks exist. People do die from shark attacks. So to have a story that is so well done on the technical side, and then on the writing and directing side and acting side, blended in with that, you know, I think very real fear of unpredictability within nature. And it's just the perfect kind of horror film. And I will say that this is the kind of scary movie that works for people who don't like scary movies. So if you have friends or family who are not into that genre, they can still really enjoy this, because I do think it's not like a jump scare kind of situation. It's more just like that sense of impending doom, because you know a confrontation is coming, right? So yeah, it's just one of those movies that if you are at all interested in sharks, if you have ever been intrigued by practical effects in movies, you know, the heyday of special effects prior to CGI and computer assisted effects, if you are interested in well-acted films, if you just really want an exceptional classic horror film that will entertain a wide variety of people, you absolutely have to watch Jaws. If you've never seen it before, if it's been a while since you've seen it before, if you've watched it earlier this week, again, watch it again, because it's so entirely worth it and one of my big picks of the week. Okay, my next recommendation is available via our streaming Canopy service, and that is 2003's Open Water. Now, this one is just like Jaws, a scripted film, but it definitely has a very different vibe to it. Open Water is another American natural horror film, so no supernatural elements whatsoever, but it definitely has a different flavor to it. It is, I would say, much less of an adventure the way that Jaws at times will feel, and just a general kind of like survival horror story. So basic storyline, we are dealing with a young couple. They go off on vacation. They decide to take one of those group scuba diving tours. They head off into the ocean. They dive with everybody else. And then, unbeknownst to them, the group reconvenes on board ship and leaves. They think everybody is on board, and the couple is just left stranded in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, and they have to figure out how to survive. And over the course of the film, things start to happen, and of course, we are talking about Shark Week, so we know sharks are going to be involved. The pacing of this one is really, really interesting because there are moments of like utter stillness and then a burst of action, and it happens a number of times like that. So you don't have that constant forward motion that you have from a traditional narrative, but you do have these pockets of like intense excitement. And it definitely, like I said, has a very different vibe in the flow to Jaws, but I do think it is an excellent film in that regard. You know, there was a time when a lot of movies that involved wildlife all felt like they had to be Jaws for a period of time, and say like the 80s, and they were trying to recreate the same kind of emotional connection and push through. But this one does something very different, and I find this in some ways even more horrifying than Jaws because it is loosely based on a true story. There really was a couple, Tom and Eileen Lonergan, who in 1998 went out with the scuba diving group, and they ended up getting accidentally left behind. And I don't want to give spoilers, but what happens to them happens. And you know, this movie is sort of loosely based on that same idea of a poorly managed dive boat crew not taking an accurate count of passengers and what that could lead to. And it's terrifying because, I mean, obviously these things have happened. So there is a precedent. It's not like, well, that would never happen in real life, except it did. So I think that's where the real terror comes in. And we are dealing with nature, which is completely unpredictable. They always say in movies, never deal with children and wild animals. And I think the whole wild animal part of it is incredibly true. You never really know what something living with its own agenda, no matter how primitive that might be, will do. So if you were out stranded in the middle of the ocean, what's going to happen? This was one of those movies that was like a sleeper hit. It cost like $120,000 to make, and it ended up raking in like $50+ million. And it had a cast of pretty much unknown people. And I think the actress had been in a couple of things, like very, very small roles, but really for all intents and purposes, they hadn't been seen in anything. And I will say, I don't know that either actor has been in too much since, but they did a very solid job with their two characters. They were not unknowns because they were bad actors, not at all the case. You feel the dread, you feel the panic, you feel the connection that they have, but you also feel the relationship is also very real. Like, you know, it's not all sunshine and roses, and in stressful situations, stressful things happen. So all of it feels very organic, and you definitely get pulled into their panic very easily. And I do think that's aided by that pacing that I was talking about, like the stillness and then the sudden bursts of action, the very, very intense emotional upheaval blended with these lengths of time where it feels like you're just waiting for something. So if you don't like films that have those periods of or stretches of not where nothing happens, because things are always happening, but where you're not getting that constant flow of action, this one might not be for you. You might want something more traditional like a Jaws. But if you are looking for those bursts of payoff, this is a good one. This is a really excellent film for that style of storytelling. And like I said, it's just a really interesting film based on a true story. You have that really fascinating kind of trajectory with the money as far as how it was a very low budget film and then it managed to catch the attention of enough of the globe that it made that $50+ million overall. So yeah, I would strongly recommend this one. It is very much a sort of experiment in pacing for me because I am generally not a fan of I've not been exposed as much to this kind of a pace in storytelling, so definitely would recommend it. It has a bit of a found footage vibe. It's not found footage, but it does have that kind of feeling where you're sort of peeking in on what's going on. So if you are interested in an interestingly paced horror film based on a true story that will definitely put you through the ringer, make sure you check out Open Water. Again, it's available on Canopy. Okay, so my final recommendation for this week is also available on DVD via our CleveNet service, and that is 1999's Deep Blue Sea. So first we had Jaws, one of my absolute all-time favorite films, period. Well done top to bottom, acting, directing, storyline, just an amazing, amazing movie. Then we had Open Water. Open Water, really, really interesting kind of experimental style, survivalist horror, definitely something very different from, say, your traditional narrative. Then you've got Deep Blue Sea. Deep Blue Sea is the perfect shark horror film for people who love kind of over-the-top B, C horror movies. I mean, it's not as utterly ridiculous as, say, Sharknado, because, I mean, it's tornado of sharks. That's just a whole different level. I do love the Sharknado movies. I won't lie about that, but whole different level of ridiculous. But it is its own outrageous sort of camp styled horror film. It is definitely a BC movie, and that's kind of where the fun of it is. So in Deep Blue Sea, it's kind of a convoluted story, shocker, with all of the camp elements, but in Deep Blue Sea, we are dealing with a group of people who end up trapped on this kind of aquatic research facility where scientists have been experimenting on sharks in order to sort of facilitate Alzheimer's research. Unbeknownst to us, these experiments have altered the sharks, and I don't want to get too far into what exactly happens, but suffice it to say, there is a storm and this group of people are trapped on this facility and have to figure out a way to survive because things happen. And it's just exciting and it's funny and it's weird and it's ridiculous, but it's a good time. And sometimes you just want that in a movie, or at least I do. I really enjoy that element of, you know, laugh out loud when we're talking about situations like this, because I mean, yes, I love like your realistic horror. I absolutely do. But there is a time and a place for a science fiction horror story about genetically altered sharks and what happens when you mess with Mother Nature. I love those kinds of themes, and there's a long history throughout film of movies that sort of touch on that. So it's a big theme. Like, it's a very realistic theme, you know, as far as like what happens when you go too far with messing with Mother Nature. But it also is played for laughs in a lot of places. I mean, you've actually got a really fabulous cast. Saffron Burrows is one of your lead scientists. Thomas Jane is sort of like the action hero guy. But you've also got Samuel L. Jackson, who does a phenomenal job in this. Samuel Jackson makes this massive, massive speech in the middle that I still periodically will be like, you remember that moment in that movie? Michael Rappaport is in here, and LL Cool J plays the best character. I mean, he's utterly ridiculous and wonderful, and so LL Cool J. And I mean, just really, this movie is just fantastic. If you want something that is kind of actiony, but also hilarious and over the top, and still deals with sharks, absolutely make sure you're watching Deep Blue Sea. There were subsequent sequels, I guess. I don't think I've actually watched any of the sequels. I don't need to. The camp and ridiculousness of this first one is plenty for me, but I do periodically watch this. It's not like one and done for me. I've watched it multiple times over the years with different groups of friends, just because you're looking for something silly, and this works. It really does. I mean, it's predictable in its storyline trajectory. Like, a lot of typical things and tropes happen, but that's kind of the point with that sort of movie. You're not looking for any like big shocking moments or anything, though there are a couple of like fantastic sort of jump scares. It's just great. I mean, I would say this one is way more fun than, say, Open Water. So if you're looking for something that's not like quite heavy and serious, but it still has some scares and a lot of, the shark theme to it, definitely check this one out. It's a good time. It's a good time. So yeah, if that's what you are in the mood for, make sure you remember Deep Blue Sea. It is again available on DVD via our CleveNet service, and it really is a must-watch. Okay, so that is it for my series of scripted films for Shark Week. If you have any recommendations for shark-focused films, whether we're talking about scripted films or documentaries that you want to recommend to fellow Shark Week fans, please comment with those below. If you have recommendations for future themes you'd like to see us explore, definitely mention those. I always have such a good time putting these lists together, and today was no different. I do really enjoy all three films that we mentioned. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next week.